Live from Washington, D.C., this is a Your Voice, Your Future Town Hall Roundtable with critical moments. Afghanistan's president comes to Washington with hat in hand, asking for U.S. troops to stay in country longer than planned.
It means some folks are going to be rotating back into Afghanistan for a few extra months relative to what otherwise would have been the case.
Which could derail President Obama's promise.
Much work that lies ahead of us.
In Iraq, anti-American rhetoric.
I think it's hard to understand why we would give nuclear concessions to a man and to a country that chants death to America.
A sentiment that's spreading. U.S. Special Forces are pulling out of Yemen as Islamic terror groups gain ground.
We're seeing extremists try to capitalize on the chaos and instability.
Physical fighting abroad, verbal battles here at home.
Get over your temper tantrum, Mr. President.
And in the streets of D.C., coffins and concerns, with pleading of no more conflict.
We need money for health care and education, not for war and occupation.
Joining us tonight, Congressman Dutch Ruppersberger of Maryland, Jamal Abdi from the National Iranian American Council, Brooke Goldstein of Lawfare Project, Zainab Chaudhry from the Council on American Islamic Relations, Breitbart contributor Adel Nazarian, Dr. Fahim Yunus from the Muslim Men's Association, Clifford May, president of Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, and from the Free Muslims Coalition, attorney Kamal Nawash. Thank you for joining us on this very busy, very important night in the fight against terror. At this moment, Afghanistan's President Ashraf Ghani here in Washington, D.C., preparing to sit down with Secretary of State John Kerry for dinner, along with other members of the President's national security team. All of this taking place just hours after President Obama announced a significant change in troop levels in Afghanistan. Meanwhile, on another front, plenty of backlash on Capitol Hill tonight after this vitriolic display in Iran. Ayatollah Khomeini over the weekend rallying thousands of followers. The chant at times there, "Death to America." This, as Americans negotiate a possible solution to the nuclear arms saga. These are just two of the topics that we will touch on tonight. And we will also be talking about social media. We'll go to Josie Sturman in just a moment for that. In the meantime, though, we are here with our panel. We'd like to kick off this conversation. And also, we have Congressman Dutch Ruppersberger on the Hill that we're going to bring in quickly. Today, we saw a rather significant change with President Obama's plan for how many troops will stay in Afghanistan. We know this had to be a bitter pill for him to swallow and for the administration because they wanted so desperately to be able to cut that number by the end of this year in half. Is this a move that's making us safer? Is this a good move by the president?
It's a band-aid. It does not change the ground reality in Afghanistan. It does not change that 50% of Afghanistan's population is under the age of 15. It does not change anything about the women's rights situation in Afghanistan. And it does not change the fact that it's only a matter of when, not if, the Taliban will be back in force whenever we withdraw. So this is a band-aid at best.
But a band-aid that you believe really is temporary for the perennial. It can't change the matter. You're saying that either way we're in trouble because at some point we're going to pull out. Is that right?
That's exactly right. The status quo will not be sustainable.
Look, if you leave prematurely, you get yourself in trouble. Imagine if we had left Germany in 1945. It either would have reverted to the Nazis or been taken over by the communists. Imagine if we had left Japan right after World War II. We would never see Japan as it is. After a conflagration like we've had, and in the context of the current global conflict, which continues to go on, we don't have a war in Afghanistan, a war in Iraq, a war in Syria. We have one global conflict with many battlefields. We have to decide which battlefields we care about. American troops need to be there. Leaving Iraq prematurely is what brought ISIS, the Islamic State, ISIL, call it what you will, to the state where it is now. If we leave Afghanistan prematurely, no question the Taliban will come back. I'm not as pessimistic as you are. I think we can suppress the Taliban, but you have to do it with a military component.
Okay, before we go to Jamal and Adele, I want to go right to Capitol Hill because we have Congressman Dutch Ruppersberger now joining us to talk about this. Congressman, I want to hear your thoughts on the president's announcement today. Do you support that move? And on top of it, all of this comes with a price tag. You have to approve that money, don't you?
Well, the first thing is that the American people are tired of war in Iraq and Afghanistan. But the purpose of us staying there now is to protect Americans' interests, our allies' interests, and to make sure that groups like ISIS don't continue to move forward. We should be there to advise our troops. We need our special operations to help out when need be. But we have to take this issue day by day. I was a former member of the Intelligence Committee. I've been to Iraq and Afghanistan on numerous occasions. And we're training the people in Afghanistan, and we're going to hear tomorrow the Afghan president talk about what they are going to do, because we cannot be sheriff for the whole world all the time. But American interests are at stake here now, and that's our highest priority.
Congressman, would this have happened were there not to be a change in leadership? We know that the relationship was strained at times between President Obama and Hamid Karzai. Now you have President Ashraf Ghani coming here to Camp David. I was there yesterday, and he was all smiles because clearly there is some sort of eye-to-eye vision on a way forward. Had he not come asking for that quote-unquote flexibility, would the president have gone ahead with this change in numbers?
I think more the issue was what didn't happen in Iraq is that they were not going to give immunity to our military people who were there. And we weren't going to put our American soldiers at risk in Iraq. Now, as far as Afghanistan is concerned, we have resources there, the best resources in the world, to help the people in Afghanistan, their military who we've trained to help themselves. But we want to make sure the transition goes the right way, because there's too many volatile issues, including ISIS, that are ready to make a move. And if they get more input, if they are able to start taking over other areas of Afghanistan, eventually that will hurt our allies, and that could hurt us, and that could also cause us to be subjected to attacks by terrorist groups.
We continue to see a budget, $3.8 billion almost annually now on this matter when it comes to Afghanistan and funding the efforts there. Are you comfortable with that number? Because you do have to sign off on this.
I'm on the Defense Appropriations Committee, and we have to do what we have to do to make sure that we protect Americans. That's what we do. And I'm very concerned, by the way, why you brought the issue up about this law of sequestration that means all of our military will have to cut their budgets to a point that makes it dangerously low and can put us at risk. Now, that's a side issue that we're talking about here. So we, on the Appropriations Committee, look at every request and look at what we need to protect our country. We must protect our country from the severe threats that are out there right now, and also protect our allies.
All right, a lot of topics being hit on right there. Hang on one moment, Congressman. Let's go to Josie Sturman to talk about how everyone can get involved in this conversation. Josie?
Well, Scott, as we know, this is a town hall. We want to hear from you. We want you to weigh in on this conversation, ask our experts questions, give us your opinions on what you're hearing. You can do that through Twitter with the hashtag #YourVoiceYourFuture, and we will be bringing you those social media questions and concerns coming up throughout the show. Scott?
Thank you, Josie. Jamal, Adele, let's talk about the appetite for a change like this. No one would like to foresee a situation in which we have to continue to put more troops on the ground, or at least leave larger numbers in a country where they are in harm's way. However, a lot of people would argue that that is the only way, perhaps, to secure a time when our troops can come home and we don't have to return like what we're seeing in Iraq right now. What are you hearing, what are you seeing when you talk to people about that appetite or lack thereof?
Well, I don't think there's a very large appetite for further military occupation. I mean, we talk about leaving Afghanistan too early. We've been there for 15 years. At what point are we going to get out of there? And I think, it's devastating that we're still there. It's devastating that the president did come to Washington to ask for the United States to stay there. But I think what it does counsel is, let's stop these wars before we start them. Let's figure out political solutions to these issues before we start putting troops on the ground. And I think that even with Afghanistan, there are political solutions that can be brokered and should be explored. And especially, with the situation in Iran that I hope we'll talk about soon, there's an opportunity to actually begin engaging and start to, in a more fulsome way, engage the stakeholders in the region on these issues that are of importance to the United States and which the American people don't want to be fighting.
What's your takeaway, Adele?
It's very interesting Jamal used the term occupation. I have to say that, America, unfortunately, our leadership, or lack thereof, got us into the mess that we're in right now abroad. And I don't believe that you can simply prevent and stop wars and nip it in the bud whenever you're going against a radical Islamist ideology that is hell-bent on completely destroying the Western values that this country stands for. And I think it's very telling that President Barack Obama, who came into office really with the intention of, having a non-interventionist mentality, which, as Clifford pointed out earlier, was really the cauldron that caused cause for the Islamic State to gain such prowess and quadruple in its influence and scope throughout the Middle East. It all started because of that mentality, and we need to have a very strong, forward-thinking and aggressive mentality in order to combat the greatest threats to democracy.
I want to hear from Brooke Goldstein. She's joining us now, Lawfare Project's Brooke Goldstein from New York, to talk about it. Brooke, when you heard the president speak today, was there anything that surprised you, or did you think this was very predictable?
I don't think it was predictable. It was actually a welcome development. It was a complete reversal of the president's policy to date that the war on terror is over, that we have nothing to fear from al-Qaeda anymore. And frankly, it's not up to us to end the war. I hear your panelists saying, you know, we don't have an appetite for war. But, you know, let's base our strategy on reality here. War has been declared on the free world. We are seeing the worldwide spread of global jihad. We're seeing in Afghanistan, in Yemen, in Gaza, in Lebanon, and parts of Pakistan. We can't just be isolationists and sit back and say, well, we don't have an appetite for war anymore, because it was exactly that policy that led to the proliferation of ISIS when we withdrew prematurely from Iraq. And on top of that, on the one hand, while the Obama administration is saying we have to increase troop presence in Afghanistan, on the other hand, we are coddling Iran. Iran is the reason why we have terrorist attacks on the rise in Afghanistan, in Iraq. Iran is establishing bases throughout the Middle East. They're also establishing bases in South America. So we have to have a cohesive, coherent policy. We're either going to fight Islamist terrorism, and we're going to express that we are indeed at war with theologically motivated terrorists, or we're going to coddle the #1 state sponsor of terror and pretend that Iran is some sort of ally in this war on terror in Syria as he assists Assad in slaughtering his own civilians.
Jamal, you said you hoped we were going to talk about Iran. It came up quickly.
Well, first of all, the definition of coddling from the panelists, the notion that we're coddling Iran right now when we still have massive sanctions against them. What we're doing is talking to Iran about restricting their nuclear program. What we're talking about is an Iran that is in there fighting ISIS, for better or worse, but on the ground fighting ISIS. We're definitely not coddling Iran, but we are needing to be mindful of the situation in the region. And when I hear people talking about Obama started ISIS, good Lord, ISIS started during the Iraq War that the Bush administration launched. There is no ISIS if there's no Iraq War. The collapse in Afghanistan.
I always say the collateral damage of 2003 is the ISIS of 2013. So you're absolutely right. I completely agree with that. That when we go in and we simply do hundreds of thousands of civilian deaths, our response is we don't keep body count. Then that's exactly what happens a decade later.
Keep in mind that the Islamic State evolved from al-Qaeda in Iraq, and al-Qaeda in Iraq preceded any of the foreign interventions you're talking about. Now, we ignored al-Qaeda for a long time. 9/11 was the result. In all the years since 9/11, we have not had a coherent strategy to defeat jihadism, and in fact, we should have had a coherent strategy starting 36 years ago. 1979, the Islamic Revolution, a global revolution, death to America was its basis. That is still in play. What I think we should fear is that we are about to sign an agreement that gives Iran a pathway to a nuclear weapon. Iran is the leading sponsor of terrorism in the world today. To let them have nuclear weapons at a time when they are occupying, controlling 4 Arab capitals, and the head of the Quds Force today threatened Jordan as well, would be a terrible strategic error. But
let's clarify. We're going to go to Brooke here in just a second, but I want to clarify when you talk about a pathway. Currently, according to the State Department and DoD numbers, you've got about 10,000 centrifuge machines believed in Iran. Initially, the goal was to cut that number, if the White House had its way, between 500 and 1,500. It looks like if there is a compromise, it's about 6,000. What they believe that does is it slows the process enough that Iran couldn't suddenly change its mind and say, hey, we're going to have the material and we can build the components for nuclear arms that might take 2 or 3 months. They say it slows it down tremendously. Brooke, I know you were chomping at the bit. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, not only are we coddling Iran, we are completely capitulating to them. We had all these demands at the start of the negotiations. They were to dismantle all but a few hundred of their centrifuges. They were to shutter their underground nuclear facility at Fordo. Iran's ballistic missile program was supposed to be frozen. Sanctions were only supposed to be lifted after intrusive inspections verified that the Iranians were in compliance with agreements. We have capitulated on all of those issues. We've taken Iran and Hezbollah off the terror threat list. We're pretending as though they're allies in the war on terror in Syria, when the only reason they're working with Assad to defeat ISIS is so that Iran can establish control over that territory. We're completely ignoring the rhetoric of death to America. And Yemen and Al-Qaeda was mentioned previously. We are making the same mistake in Yemen that we made in Iraq. We have pulled out our security forces in Yemen, which was apparently, according to Obama just a year ago, some sort of success.
Yeah,
and now Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula is moving into Yemen, which is arguably the greatest, most dangerous arm of Al-Qaeda.
No, you're right. And Brooke, that shouldn't be forgotten. AQAP is of serious concern, and everyone in the intelligence community agrees with that. And we're going to talk about Yemen also coming up in just a bit. I want to bring in to the conversation now Zainab Chowdhury from the Council on American Islamic Relations, who's joining us from our studio upstairs. Yeah, go ahead. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, Zainab, what's your reaction to the conversation going on at this point regarding when it comes to the status of this debate and whether or not the U.S. is doing everything it should at this point?
I think it's really important whenever we have this conversation on whether or not we should start another war, whether we should invade Iran, and the whole debate on what's in Americans in the United States' best interests. We have to look at the fact that historically speaking, since 1980, the United States has invaded, occupied, or committed aggression against over 14 countries, Islamic countries in the Middle East. And where has that gotten us? I mean, we have veterans who are returning home from war, and they're not being adequately taken care of. If we go to Washington, D.C., you can't walk 2 blocks without running into a homeless veteran who is begging for food. I think it's really important to keep that balance while we're maintaining our interests abroad globally in the region, in the Middle East, and where have you. We also have to make sure that we have the ability to protect these veterans and make sure that they have the resources available to them when they return home. Now, Brooke pointed out some really interesting comments earlier about the United States coddling Iran and the fact that we're really meeting their demands. I think it's really important to also look at the fact that the International Atomic Energy Agency's director, he also said that if the United States was able to reach a plea bargain or a deal or negotiations with Iran, then he has no reason to believe that negotiation should not move forward. I think we really have to focus on diplomacy rather than whether a war is the next step.
Kamal Nawash, is that correct? Do we need to focus on diplomacy more than anything else at this point?
Yeah, I totally agree that we need to focus on diplomacy. I mean, in terms of Iran, we've had sanctions on Iran now for 30 years, and they've been severe sanctions. And all that has done is just wide the differences between Iran and the United States, and the contention and the acrimony between us. I think, I listened to what the other guests say, that we need a more aggressive policy towards Iran, but they're not really offering an alternative. I mean, what would be that more aggressive policy? Okay, so we don't reach a deal with them. We continue to put more sanctions on them, as some of your guests are suggesting. Well, how is Iran supposed to respond to that? Well, they're going to respond to that by seeing the U.S. as a threat to its existence, which means it's going to build more centrifuges, which means even if it wasn't thinking about a nuclear bomb before, they're now going to think about it because they feel that there's an immediate threat to them. So while I don't have the specific answer as to what to do about Iran, but we certainly have 30 years of experience of sanctions and fighting with Iran, at least through either through proxies or through a Cold War. And the fact that we're trying something different today is reflective of the fact that what we did for the last 30 years has failed. And in terms of the issue of as to whether we should put boots on the ground or not in other countries, I think as a matter of policy, the United States should not, it should not be a policy of ours where the only way we can save certain regimes, whether it's in Afghanistan or Iraq, is by propping them up with American troops on the ground. That's not sustainable. Our focus should be to help these people to defend themselves.
Okay, look, hang on, Paul.
Look,
I'm sorry.
We have to recognize that there is something going on in the world that is historic and very threatening, and that is an international jihad. And there are various jihadi groups. There are also Muslim countries that are fighting the jihad. If you look at Egypt, they're fighting the jihadis in Sinai. Jordan is trying to keep the jihadis out of its country. The Kurds are fighting against the jihadis. The Israelis are fighting against the jihadis.
And we should help those countries.
And we should help all of those countries. You're absolutely right. We need to look upon this with one strategy, which we haven't had under any administration, but it's got to be a strategy sort of like the Cold War. Understand that we're in a generational conflict with an ideology that is totalitarian, with an ideology that is profoundly anti-democratic, and we need a strategy to fight it. It will include military interventions at times. It will include diplomacy. It will include economic weapons. But what it can't be is simply saying, we're tired, we don't want to fight anymore. Let's let the Iranians have nuclear weapons. Let's let the Islamic State take over as much of the Middle East as it wants.
And I really have some news for everyone. Iran, regardless of whatever sanctions we may try to impose, they have enough centrifuges right now for 7 bombs. And I guarantee you, by the time these talks come to a final, addendum, whatever is going to happen, they'll have enough to build 8. I am talking on an almost daily basis to Iranians within Iran who tell me, it's 99% of the population that wants regime change.
Okay, let's do this. We're going to get away from the theoretical for a minute here, and we're going to talk about the tactical. And the reason is it's taking a lot of headlines in the news these days. And I want to switch gears to talk about drones. So we're going to go to our Capitol Hill correspondent, Christine Frizzell, who's joining us with a conversation about that, because the role that they are playing and the threat that some believe is being posed here at home is significant as well. Christine?
Yeah, that's right, Scott. When you talk about foreign policy strategy, there are some things that need to be discussed here at home. And actually something kind of big happened today. The Federal Aviation Administration sort of changed their policy when it comes to commercial drones. Now remember, commercial drones can be very helpful. They can help, farmers oversee their crops. They can help cell phone inspection workers. I just heard in Texas they're starting a program where drones are going to help find stray dogs around certain cities in the state. So these can be very helpful, but they can also be somewhat concerning. So what the FAA said today is, instead of going through applicants on a case-by-case basis, if you're a company and you want to use a drone, as long as it's under 55 pounds, as long as you fly under 200 feet and stay away from airports and do so during daylight, you're going to be able to do this. But take a look, because this is sort of a tough tightrope to walk.
They've become one of the most effective weapons of modern-day war. U.S. drone strikes are used to conduct targeted killings, including terrorist leader Anwar al-Awlaki, and just last week, Adnan Garar, who Pentagon officials say planned the 2013 attack on the Westgate Mall in Kenya. The Secret Service is now running drills to try to figure out how to intercept rogue drones. Unmanned aerial vehicles also reduce troop levels and troop risk and provide extra eyes in the sky. But they're a weapon that could be used against the United States as well. On Capitol Hill last week, experts warned nuclear power plants, military bases, and government buildings could all be at risk.
Even consumer-grade drones can be rigged to carry out potent attacks.
The concerns are real. There is nothing to stop the criminal element from purchasing a UAS and using it to cause localized or catastrophic damage.
So again, Scott, this is a tough one for lawmakers, really just dealing with some uncharted waters here.
All right, let's talk to a lawmaker. Thank you, Christine. Let's go to Congressman Ruppersberger again on this one. You heard the piece there. We talk about new legislation possibly being posed on all levels when it comes to drones. What are your thoughts?
Drones can be very useful. We use drones in the war against terror, and it can be helpful, but they have to be regulated. I'm very worried about an al-Qaeda or someone in the United States who can get control of a drone and cause havoc. So that needs to be dealt with. I was sitting here listening to a lot of the issues about terrorism and about Iran. And I think the other issue, too, we have to stand up now to terrorism. If we don't, it'll continue to grow. But we can't do it alone. We need to put a coalition together, especially in the Middle East, of our allies. We have to protect Israel. You know, Iran will want to attack Israel. Iran exports terrorism. They've got a Quds force that were throughout the war. They're trying to kill people and their enemies in the United States and other places. As far as negotiations are concerned, we have to make sure that this agreement will have total transparency, so that if in fact we find that they're violating any terms of this agreement, that we will step in and move forward with sanctions. Remember, our sanctions, Congress's sanctions, is what brought Iran to the table, and we have to hold that leverage against Iran. They're only going to abide by the agreement if they know they're going to be held accountable, and we're going to stand up. But on the other hand, we need to sit down and try to resolve any issues that we can as far as stopping them from moving forward with atomic and nuclear weapons. Because if we don't, the whole Middle East is very dangerous.
So Congressman,
Iran, wait a minute, Iran, I mean other countries, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, they will buy nuclear weapons also, which makes the situation worse. So from the point of view, and it's tough when you have 6 people here, but listening to what you were saying, we've got to stand up and make sure that terrorism doesn't move forward, and we have to make sure that we hold Iran accountable to protect Israel and our allies in the Middle East.
But so, Congressman, let me ask you then, because there is this debate over whether or not we are going to the table with people who will have a fair conversation. I mean, you saw the video from over the weekend out of Tehran where you had Ayatollah Khomeini having this speech on the first day of spring, and there were chants of death to America, and a lot of your fellow congressmen are saying we can't be dealing with him. I know that it's not necessarily through him. A lot of it's through President Rouhani and, of course, the foreign minister. But are we at the table in good conscience with negotiators?
I agree. I wouldn't trust Iran on any situation unless we have verification and we can oversee what they're doing. But if we don't try to stop them through negotiations, what's the alternative? War. Because there's no other alternative there. And believe me, we have to stand by the United States. We'll stand by Israel and our allies there against Iran. But if we can have that verification, if we can make sure through verification that they are not continuing to develop the nuclear weapons, if we can see if they do violate the agreement, we can jump in the next day and move forward with those sanctions. It's leverage and it's holding them accountable. I would never trust them. Khomeini is a leader who's never left Iran. What does he know about the world or about a lot of these issues? But we have them at the table because of the leverage of sanctions. And by the way, let's talk about Congress' role too, because this is an agreement. You know, the President of the United States is negotiating with his State Department, with some very qualified people. Now, if in fact Congress' role will be that we can deal with the issue of sanctions, but we have to let the negotiation finish and let's see what it is. You know, as a member of the Intelligence Committee for years, I was briefed on a lot of the negotiations, more as a lot of it's classified. So if we can put those checks and balances to stop them from developing these nuclear weapons, that's what we want. And if we can't trust them, this agreement allows us to go in to inspect on a regular basis, and we also need to know how long it's going to take them, if they do violate the agreement, to develop the nuclear weapon so we can stop it before it starts.
Well, we tried to take the temperature a little bit on Capitol Hill among your colleagues with Congressman Scott Perry and Pascrell as well, who talked about this issue right now of how we can have confidence in dealing with Iran. Let's hear what they had to say.
Okay.
It's the symbolism that they long for, to say that they have won, they have kicked America out, their policy is the dominant one, and we can't stick with our allies, and we can't stick with our mission, and it's everything that we disdain in America. When they say things like that and we hear that we're close to a deal, most Americans do not see their negotiating partner, whether it's buying a car or whether it's anything in their daily lives, where they would negotiate with somebody who was at the same time, at the very same moment of the negotiation, calling for their death.
I think we're dealing with the entire country, not just the Ayatollah. And I think it's worth trying to have a negotiated conclusion, so that's one way to keep nuclear weapons from Iran. And so I think we should try to do that to the best of our ability keep talking, keep talking, keep talking. When we're talking, we're not fighting.
Past talking, we're beyond talking. You just need to look at history to see that President Rouhani, back in 2004, when he was the head of the Expediency Council in Iran, he was the nuclear negotiator, so to speak. And only in 2013, a report surfaced that he went on the record, on camera, and said outright, while the Europeans were in Iran, while we were discussing how we weren't going to expand our program, we were ahead and we were expanding our program. Trita Parsi, a lobbyist for the Iranian regime, head of NIAC, sorry to say it, public knowledge. Yeah, but basically, I'm sorry, but you know, Iran cannot be trusted. It's called taqiyya, if you want to talk about it in Islamic law, Sharia law. Taqiyya, tahiyya in Farsi, actually permits concealing the truth.
Yeah, I want to respond to that about Iran.
Sure.
Go ahead, Congressman.
I think, well, first of all, let me just stop here.
Well, the Congressman's about to leave, so
let me say this.
Let's get him in and then come right to you.
I would never trust Iran. But if the agreement has conditions in there that we can inspect Iran, if we can oversee them, then it's up to us to find out whether they're violating their agreement. Because the other alternative is war. There's no other alternative here, because once they try to develop nuclear weapons, which can not only attack Israel, who we will protect, and we will help Israel and stand behind them, as we will our other Arab allies in the region. But it's up to the agreement. And if that agreement isn't strong enough to do that, or if they're violating it, we're going to go after them on sanctions. And if that doesn't work, there are other alternatives where we're going to have to move forward. And as far as people in the street, that happens all over. Look at the threats of ISIS. Look at the things they're cutting people's heads off and bringing people alive because they use that as a recruitment tool. So it's not about Iran. It's about us, and it's about the agreement being able to inspect and finding out if they're violating. If they're violating it, we're going to jump on them with both feet. We've got to do that, and we've got to be strong and show that we mean business, and that's what the agreement has to say. I want to see the agreement when it's finished, and then Congress will get involved because we're the ones that control sanctions.